So the fine folks over at Evolution Power Tools were kind enough to send me a miter saw, a stand, and an assortment of blades that cut both wood and metal. As you can see, I've already been using this saw to cut up the framing for some shop projects, and it's been performing really well. So today I'm going to do a quick overview of the saw, and then I'm going to swap out the blades and we'll cut some aluminum, some steel, and of course some different types of wood, and we'll see how this saw performs. So if all that is something you think you'd be interested in, stick around. Alright, let me run down the general stats real quick on this saw, and these are all taken right from the book that came with it. It has a 15 amp motor with a no load speed of 2500 RPMs. Now that may sound a little slow, but you have to remember this saw is also designed to cut metal as well as wood. And if you look up other metal cutting miter saws, they generally spin a little slower than, say, a dedicated wood saw like a DeWalt or a Bosch or something like that. It weighs about 34 pounds, so it's not real heavy. Even attached to the stand, I can pick the whole thing up and move it around my shop. And with the proper blade installed, it's capable of cutting mild steel plate up to 1/4 of an inch thick, mild steel box section with walls up to 1/8 of an inch thick, and it can cut a piece of wood up to 11 3/4 of an inch wide and 3 1/8 inch thick. Now that being said, I have cut 4x4 posts on this, which are 3.5 by 3.5, and it cut them just fine. Another design feature of this saw that really lends it to be a metal cutting miter saw is the arbor size. The saw has a 1-inch arbor as opposed to the 5/8 arbors you'll find on your typical wood cutting miter saw. So the lower RPMs of the motor and the 1-inch arbor are really the two design features of this saw that make it ideal for cutting metal. So I'm going to quickly go over a few other features this saw has, and then we'll get to cutting. So first of all, the guide rails of the saw are very smooth. They seem very strong and sturdy. The blade shroud, this guard, the tilt assembly, and the main body of the saw are all cast aluminum. The handle is plastic with a rubber overmold that makes it very comfortable to use, and the motor housing is also plastic. It has a lot of features you're going to find on a typical miter saw, such as this depth stop. You just flip this tab over and then you adjust the stop to restrict how deep of a cut the saw will make. So you could use this feature for making dados or rabbets or cutting half lap joints, things like that. There's also a quick release hold down clamp. You just raise it up, swing it over. You can lock this in place here, hit this button, it drops your screw down, and then you can tighten this down, and that will secure your material for making safer cuts. And the clamp is shaped in a way where it's going to hold down both flat and round material. Now this saw both miters and bevels, and it has positive stops at 15, 22.5, 30, and 45 degrees. And of course, back to 0. And to bevel the saw, you just loosen this knob and roll it over. When I first got this, I just adjusted the stops real quick to make sure when I'm up here, I'm perfectly 90 to the bed. And when I'm all the way over, I'm at a perfect 45. It also has this second stop right here for the bevel, which you adjust with a screw right behind this one. And I adjusted that so when this is pushed in, it stops the saw at 33.9 degrees. And if you do any trim work, if you install crown, you'll know why that measurement's important. And just above that is another stop for locking the saw in the down position. And this knob will stop it from sliding. You push this little button here to lock the blade for blade changes, and then right up here on the right side of the handle is the switch for the laser. And right out of the box, the laser came perfectly aligned with the left side of the blade. So if you're using the laser for alignment, just remember the kerf is going to be on the right side of the blade, which means your waste piece should be on the right side of the blade also. And yes, this is a brushed motor, so 10 years down the road, maybe when the brushes wear out, this is where you'd replace them. And like I said, they also sent me this. Am I recording? Did I even hit record? And like I said, they also sent me this nice sturdy stand to mount the saw on. You just push these tabs in and you can fold up the legs if you want to store it. To remove the saw, you just flip these up and you can lift the saw right off of the stand really easily. And it has these roller supports that extend out pretty far. These give you plenty of support to cut like a 10-foot board on this without worrying about it falling all over the place. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the dust collection. Now we all know dust collection on miter saws is pretty terrible. But with this saw, you do have a few options. First, they include this little dust bag that goes on the dust port, which is right here at the top of the saw. And I think we all know that these things are pretty useless. You're going to have much better luck with dust collection if you hook an actual vacuum or extractor up to this saw. And luckily, the port that's built into this saw fits my dust right hose really nicely. This is just a standard rubber dust right connector, and it fits right on there perfectly. It also fits the hose from my Festool extractor, but instead of fitting around the outside like the dust right hose, this fits on the inside. They also provide this adapter that has a couple different sizes of connections, and this largest size is a perfect fit to this 2¼ inch shop vac connector. But even with this hooked up, you're not going to get great dust collection on a miter saw unless you modify the dust collection chute somehow. So with that in mind, I hung a tarp on my garage door, and I'm going to move the saw over in front of that tarp, and hopefully that'll help to contain all the little metal flakes and the wood chips I'll produce while I'm testing this out. So give me a second to move the saw, and we'll start cutting. Alright guys, I have the blade on here that came with the saw. It's the combo blade. It's a general purpose blade. It'll cut metal, wood, plastic, just about anything you want to throw at this. You can see I cut this 4x4 here pretty clean. This would be fine for doing any kind of construction work. You'd rip through this, no problem. Nice clean cut. The same with this is a redwood, or no, yeah, it's a redwood 2x4. Nice clean cut. But since this is the combo blade and it can cut metal, I went ahead and I took a couple of these number 8 3.5 inch construction screws and I sunk them into the end here so they're in the wood. Oh, drop that one. Let me grab this one. So they're into the wood like that. I'm going to go ahead and take some slices out of this and see how the blade handles that. And of course, I'll be wearing eyes and ears. Remember, this stuff is important, so protect it. I'm just going to hold this piece by hand like I would normally. Couple sparks flew, but went through it no problem. Alright, that was 7 cuts, and I felt a little resistance when the blade hit the screws, but it wasn't that bad. It went through them pretty easily. Now the package says this blade will cut mild steel and nail embedded wood. Well, these aren't nails, they're screws. And unlike nails, screws are made from hardened steel, so these screws are a lot harder than a nail of the same size. So I'm probably abusing this blade a little more than its intended use, but I'm going to go ahead and slice off a piece of this 4x4 and compare the quality of cut to when the blade was brand new. Alright, this was with the new blade. It's a nice clean cut. I'm going to take another cut and compare the quality of the two. Well, I can't see any difference, can you? This was with the new blade, and this is with the blade after I cut through those hardened screws. So as a general use blade where you might occasionally hit a nail in a piece of wood, I think this blade would do just fine. Now I'm going to swap that out for this aluminum cutting blade and cut some aluminum and see how it does. So swapping the blade on this saw is really easy. There's a little button up here to lock the arbor in place, and then this Allen wrench you use to remove the arbor nut is stored right back here on the saw. So nothing to it really. I just swapped this blade in like half a minute. So I have a few different pieces of aluminum I'm going to test this blade with. First I have this really thin 3/4 by 3/4 angle. Then I have this C-channel that has some pretty thick walls. It's pretty heavy duty. And then I'll cut this piece of 1 and 5/16 tubing. And then last I have this 1 inch solid bar. And of course for the round stock, I'll be using the clamp to hold it in place nice and secure. Alright, that obviously wasn't much of a challenge for this blade, so let's move on to something thicker. Again, it went through that material, no problem. And as you can see there, that cut nice and clean. All right, now I'll try some round stock and we'll see how that clamp works. Again, that's a nice, smooth, clean cut. Now I'm going to cut this bar stock. Well, the blade had no problem with it. Went right through. Nice and easy. This clamp works great. It's holding this round stock really tight, really secure. I have no worries about this slipping or rotating on me. There you go. It just keeps making nice, clean cuts. So next is going on this blade that is specifically designed to cut steel. All right, guys, I have the steel blade installed, and again, I'm going to start small and work my way up. First, I have a couple pieces of scrap flat stock. This stuff is about 3/8 of an inch thick. Then I have a piece of 5/8 all thread. Then I'm going to jump up to this. It's 2.5 inch square with 3/8 inch thick walls. So if it can cut this, it can cut just about anything I'll need it for. I almost forgot I have a piece of 1.25" black pipe. I'll be cutting this also. And for all this stuff, I'm going to use the clamp to hold it down just to be extra safe. Again, that blade went through very easy. I'll show you these cuts. They're super smooth, super clean. See how it does with this all thread. That looks really clean. I don't even see any burrs or anything on it. I'm going to grab a nut and see if I can just screw a nut right onto this without cleaning it up or anything. So I'm going to set that right there. Sorry, it took me a little bit to find the nut, but here's the nut. And there's the cut in. Let's see if this will just thread right on. Yeah, that is a clean cut. The nut threads right on there without doing any cleanup at all. That's kind of impressive, actually. You can see how I cut this before. This was probably with my portaband or maybe an angle grinder, I don't know, but not exactly smooth and clean, so let's see if the saw can do better. Again, clean and accurate. I had to cut a bunch of rings. Actually, it was a bigger black pipe when I made my hammer rack, but I had to cut them all with a portaband. And if I would have had this saw, it would have went a lot quicker and the cuts would have been just as clean or cleaner. All right, this saw's handled everything so far. So this is going to be a real test. Let's see what it does with this. All right, here we go. Well, that didn't seem to be a problem for this saw at all. There's your result. That's a nice clean cut again. Alright guys, I have a selection of woods here. Some are hard, some are soft, some are thick, and some are thin. I'm just going to go through and make some cuts on these, and we'll get through this and get a good test out of the way without taking up too much of your time. No problem there, super smooth cut. Handle the walnut, no problem. This is a thicker walnut. Now this one I will talk about. This is 2.5 by 2.5 rosewood with some figure in it. This is very hard, very heavy piece of wood here. No problem. Motor didn't bog down at all. Went through very smoothly. And that is a hard, tough piece of wood. Let's see what else I have. So I found this piece of walnut. It is 6 inches wide and 2.5 inches thick. Again, very smooth cut. Motor's not bogging down at all. This saw's legit. It's a good saw. So I've used the Evolution R255 on a few projects. I put it through its paces today, cutting some really thick steel and some very hard woods. And so far, I would say the performance has been excellent. Operating the saw has been very smooth and comfortable. Changing the blades is quick and easy. And the motor has plenty of power for everything that I've thrown at it. And speaking of the blades, I took a look at them really closely after I did all these cuts, and they're still good as new. The blades that Evolution sells are all made in Japan, which means the steel and the carbide used to make them is going to be top quality, and I don't think you could go wrong with using these blades. Alright, so I think we've established that I like the saw. The quality of the blades is phenomenal, but who exactly is this saw for? If I was someone who did only woodworking and I needed a miter saw in my shop, is this the saw I would buy? Well, frankly, no, it's not. If I was looking for a woodworking only miter saw, I would want a 12-inch blade, I would want it to bevel both ways, and I would want a 5/8 inch arbor and not a 1-inch arbor. And really the arbor size is the key. Having a 5/8 inch arbor on your miter saw is going to open up a wider variety of blades you can get and make sourcing blades for your saw a lot easier. Now on the flip side of that, if I was someone who worked strictly in metal and I wanted a miter saw for my shop, this would be a great option. With the motor speed, the arbor size, and the blades you can get from Evolution, this is a fantastic choice for a dedicated metal cutting miter saw. Or if you're someone like me who sometimes works in wood, sometimes works with metal, and you have a small shop, you only have room for one saw, I think this is a great choice. Mostly what I use a miter saw for is to break down larger pieces of wood into their rough sizes, and then I do all my fine cuts or finish cuts on my table saw. Or if I'm building some shop furniture or a jig or maybe something quick that's not permanent, I'll use a miter saw to cut my pieces to their final dimensions and then assemble it from there. But then if I need to build something like my anvil stand or a hammer rack and I need to cut steel like this, I can just swap out to the metal cutting blade and make the cuts I need. But if you're someone who's living the dream and you have a nice big dedicated shop and you work in both wood and metal, the ideal setup would be have something like this with a metal blade on it and then a nice 12-inch double bevel slider for wood. But for me, in my small shop and the kind of work I do, I think this saw is going to serve me very well. So thank you Evolution Power Tools for sending me this beautiful saw, the stand, and those awesome blades. Links to all this stuff will be in the description. If there's anything more you'd like to know about this saw, post those questions down below. Your questions and comments are always welcome. And that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.